Hi, I'm your host, Dave Kemp, and this is Future Ear Radio. Each episode, we're breaking down one new thing, one cool new finding that's happening in the world of hearables, the world of voice technology. How are these worlds starting to intersect? How are these worlds starting to collide? What cool things are going to come from this intersection of technology? Without further ado, let's get on with the show. Okay, so we are joined here today by two of the Bamboo Learning execs, Irina Fine and Ian Freed. So Irina, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
I'm Irina Fine. I'm co-founder and head of content at Bamboo. I guess I spent most of my career, or the whole career, in education. Started in my 20s and 3 decades in teaching and learning, product development in both classroom curriculum and EdTech products. And a few years ago, which I used to say 1 year ago, now it's 2 years ago, now it's over 2 years ago, Ian and I got together and he introduced me to voice technology. I had no idea about Alexa devices or anything. And it's fascinating to work in this area because I think the potential for learning is huge.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So, Ian, you've been on the podcast before. Great to have you back. Share a little bit about who you are and maybe a little bit of a backstory on how you and Irina met and kind of formed Bamboo and have brought it to this point.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again, Dave, for having me back on the podcast. I guess that means I didn't completely fumble the first carry on the podcast. But it's great to be here. I'm Ian Freed, co-founder and CEO of Bamboo Learning. And I have been in the tech world pretty much my whole career, many years at Amazon, and actually ran Alexa and Echo. And they just had their new product announcements recently. So that's kind of fun. Maybe we have 3 minutes to talk about that on the podcast too, but,
yeah, I'm sure we can weave some of that.
That'd be fun. Anyway, so Irina and I actually met in the early 1990s. I had a startup back then that was a technology consulting company. And she was born and raised in the former Soviet Union. And my business actually had a pretty large set of projects that kept growing, actually. But when I first met Irina, it was in Moscow. And she was actually brought by a friend who we were supposed to hire, but the friend decided to take another job and instead brought Irina to the interview and said, well, I'm not going to work for you, but maybe you'd like to hire Irina.
Very Russian, very not distant.
And we were a little bit nonplussed, but we were incredibly lucky because, on that first day, my head of technology and head of the Moscow office and I all interviewed Irina, and we thought, wow, she's, super smart, certainly knows English and Russian. Little did we know, and it's many years ago, but Irina was one of the folks you encounter in your career every so often who, no matter what the job is, she'll do it extremely well, very quickly, and then ask what else she can do. And that probably happened every 2 to 3 months. And we kept giving Irina more and more challenging work. So she went from translator, receptionist, kind of do everything as people come in the door, to office manager, to finance manager, to assistant director, to acting director, over the course of just a couple of years. And in addition to being work colleagues for several years back then, we got to be really good friends. It turns out, actually, one of the people who interviewed Irina is now Irina's husband. So Eric was one of my first hires from the US. And so Eric and Irina and I have been friends for many decades. And I think probably in some ways the Bamboo story goes back maybe 5 years ago. The three of us had dinner in Brooklyn, might even be 6 years ago. And I think Irina and I just thought, well, it would be really fun to work together again. And we didn't know how or why or where, if, but then, Irina, as she said, has been a leader in education for many years, and I've always been very interested in it. And so when I left Amazon and was sort of toying with what to do next, I thought it would be really fun to start building applications for Alexa. And because I think of my interest in education, I thought, well, who knows what this will turn out to be, but let's just go work on an app together. And that's all it was in the beginning. And so again, we met in Brooklyn, I think at a brew pub or something. My sons were there. If my sons were there, it was definitely a brew pub because they're in their 20s. So that was what they wanted to do. But Irina met us there. I kind of explained Alexa and Echo, how it worked. And we thought, well, let's just try to build a project together. And we kind of played around with Bamboo Math, but we didn't know what would make it special. We kind of figured that out later. But Irina also, among other things, was trained in music, classical music and classical music performance. And so she had the idea to come up with Bamboo Music, which was actually the first product we ever shipped. So that's how we started. And sure enough, we remembered how fun it was to work together. And it is, maybe because we're both a little more seasoned, it's even more fun now because, I think we've both come a long way in our career. We enjoy each other, respect each other, and we come up with really fun ideas by collaborating. So.
And I also think we're passionate about the same area now. So, I mean, the early 90s, it was a job. This feels like more than a job. So it's
great.
I love that. I mean, there's so many things about you two and Bamboo that really, I think, are magnetic about the really the voice ecosystem in general. There really is there's an energy to it that it does kind of draw you in. And what I find so interesting is, not only do you have this, 30 plus year relationship that, you've found a way to sort of create like this second coming of it and finding a new way to work together. But, what I find so fascinating about Bamboo is that you are such a good representation of, I think, where the really big potential is for this space. And it's like you said, Ian, it's building on top of Alexa as a platform or Google Assistant as a platform. So I thought that, before we go into really the meat and potatoes of today's conversation, which is going to be the update that you all just issued, I thought that, while I have both of you on here, I would love to share, in your own words, how you sort of built Bamboo to this point, and then we can segue from that into the update and sort of this next evolution, framing it under the pretext of like, this is, I think, one of the first iterations of what we're going to likely see, which is real, very complex, very robust skills that are built on top of these platforms.
Yeah, maybe I can kick it off, and Irina, you can certainly add a lot on this question. So, our goal with Bamboo Learning really was to use these voice platforms, whether Alexa or Google Assistant, or maybe even some others will come along, to enable a way for kids to learn that's a little bit different than they're typically used to. And that is because it's voice driven. And so, if you think about it, kids are interacting using their voice at a really early age. 2-year-olds can talk, and they certainly can't, write or spell or things like that. But so, talking is a very natural way for kids to interact. And during my time at Amazon, we certainly saw that the very passionate users of Alexa in the early days were kids. They would ask Alexa to tell them a joke, and they kind of learned what Alexa could do and couldn't do through trial and error. And maybe we're a little more patient than adults in some ways. But, from the beginning, we felt like voice platforms are just another computing platform, just like mobile, just like the internet, just like back in the earlier sort of PC days of computing, what were known as GUI interfaces, graphical user interfaces. Every time there's a kind of change in technology, there's an opportunity to be really creative with that technology and not just do the, set my alarm or, I remember in the early days of computing, like doing a calculator on a PC was a big deal. Well, think of how sophisticated computers and mobile apps are now. Well, our thinking was that voice platforms would be another avenue for huge innovative creativity in applications that would be really important for people. And it just so happens that, our favorite people for starting Bamboo tend to be young people, and as young as 4 or 5, and that's really what we're targeting, 4 to 5 on up to maybe 11 or 12. We have a few apps that are for older kids and adults, but right now especially and especially with kids at home from school and still in many parts of the country, we think our applications are just perfect for them. And so the interactions are long. They can be 5-10 minutes on the low end, all the way up to 30 or 40 on the high end. So that's all I want to say about that. And Irina, you should jump in for sure.
Yeah.
Well, when it comes to education, the importance of interaction and kids hearing as many words as they can, I mean, that has been proven that that's the basis for, school success, career success, and voice gives you that opportunity to interact, to listen, to, as Ian mentioned, without being able to read or write, you can actually process information, do a bit of an analysis, and form your own thoughts and express them. So, and the recent events, I think, highlighted this need for a new EdTech tool that allows younger kids to work independently, without having to know how to switch from one window to another and land on the wrong screen most of the time. So they can actually do it without their parents, be engaged. Another thing that voice offers, I feel, that is currently missing, it's following spoken directions. With no other online tools you can do this. And in the classroom, that's part of the daily process. But right now, when everybody's out of the classroom, voice is pretty much the only tech that can, emulate that. So that's for language development. I think any application as a general basis, it's a great tool to boost your language skills.
And so take me back to this night that you were in Brooklyn at the brew pub. And, I'm just curious, like, what were the light bulb moments for you? Like, obviously, Ian, you came from the world of Amazon, and so you probably saw the potential here early on. But what was it about education in particular, and obviously Irina's background being so education focused, was there something that you saw, Ian, from the voice standpoint, and then combined with Irina's subject matter expertise in education, that you made that really clicked, and you said there's a lot of potential here?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure it's any one thing. A lot of times innovation happens when you start seeing a number of trends, if you will, that can potentially come together to create something new. One that is definitely attractive about voice technology is that it's really inexpensive. And I think our passion and our belief, both of us, is that anyone and everyone should have access to the same education. And, certainly in the US today, it's not the reality. It's unfortunate, and that is where we are. And so I think at some level, both of us felt like being able to offer this really innovative way to learn that is not complicated, that where, kids can literally just say, Alexa, open Bamboo Math, and they can be working on math lessons in, in seconds. Or Alexa, open Bamboo Books, and they can be listening to a story and engaging in reading comprehension. And then our new one, of course, we'll talk about that, Bamboo English. It's about language arts. But so the accessibility, so, devices, depending on whether you get them used or new or whatever, they can be as low as $20. That's a pretty eye-opening world for someone who may not be able to buy lots of books, every week. If they can, through that $20 device, get access to lessons that help them reinforce what they're learning in school, or, in this world, it may be the best way for some kids to learn because they don't have to sit in front of a screen with a keyboard. So, so I think it's the accessibility, it's kind of that low price point. I do think that kids just loved voice devices. I mean, usually, it's kind of why build something on a voice device? Well, it's where kids were headed. I mean, and I do think actually that Siri kind of started it. I mean, you've definitely seen parents with kids who hand over their phone and the kids are using Siri. I mean, it's happening, I think, a little less after smart speakers came on board, but kids are learning it so early. So, I think our belief is everyone will use a lot more voice devices, voice applications in more and more different environments in a much more natural way than ever happened even 2 or 3 years ago on a going forward basis. So it's inexpensive, accessible on the one hand, kids love it on the other hand. And I think the third one for both of us is that, education is, I mean, it's related to the first, but there are gaps in our education system that are pretty significant. And I think that one thing that we almost don't think of it as, it's almost like, yeah, of course we do that. It's the self-paced learning. Like everything we do is self-paced. And I think that's the advantage of that is if you're struggling to catch up, we'll go, in school, we'll go at the pace that you can go in Bamboo Math or Bamboo Books. On the other hand, if you're going really fast, we'll keep giving you harder and harder problems, and you don't have to like get a different book off the shelf or load a different piece of software. It's all in the same app. And even more to the point now with Bamboo English, and it's a sneak preview in terms of what we're going to talk about later, but let's say you're really good at spelling. Well, that's one of the features in Bamboo English, but maybe you're not as good in vocabulary. Well, you can go as fast as you want. You might start out in kindergarten spelling and you zoom through and you're in second grade spelling. But vocabulary, it's harder. And so you just have to spend more time on it. So that's fine. So I guess I would say those three things: accessibility through the low cost, passion that kids have for voice devices, and us wanting to do something to allow kids to be really excited about their learning because it's geared toward them through that self-paced mechanism. For me, those are the three. Irina might have some of those and some others. So
it's basically the opportunity to bring high volume of high quality educational instruction into the homes of those who otherwise would not have access to it is basically what I find. That's what drives, I think, me in that whole endeavor. And it's self-paced, it's also self-directed. So you see kids being empowered. They're empowered, and they're not inhibited, and there are no fears of being judged by teachers or peers. So I see kids going a lot further with the voice technology and trying harder and new things. Kids who otherwise would shut down in a more traditional environment. So that's super interesting and fascinating to see.
Yeah, I love those three sort of pillars that you outline there. And I think this whole idea about learning at your own pace that's a really intriguing thought to me. And what comes to mind here, obviously, like you mentioned, Ian, this is really appealing to kids for a number of different reasons. What has been the reception from parents and teachers around Bamboo? And have you had teachers that advocate for Bamboo on your behalf that say, you know, this is a great tool, or or parents? Curious about those two.
Yeah. Do you want to take those, Irina? It's kind of up your alley.
Sure. We hear parents' feedback is super encouraging. They see their kids loving it. They see their kids learning something that later translates into school success directly. We heard specific feedback with kids working with Bamboo books and working on comprehension questions, and then sitting with a worksheet and basically being able to do the worksheet faster than they were before they worked with the Bamboo Books app. So that's super encouraging. Since March, we had teachers and librarians recommending our skills to parents because everybody is looking for variety, right? And a little bit to reduce the screen time as much as they can and wherever they can do it. So we don't have direct links to schools yet, but we definitely have teachers and librarians and even pediatricians recommending it to parents to basically get away from the screen, take a break, be active, be engaged, and interact.
Yeah, I think that's what's interesting about this is that I imagine with Bamboo Math, for example, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I'm envisioning this is that, you know, if I'm a little boy, I'm sitting there and I have my notebook out and I'm sort of following along, writing the math problems out as Alexa's guiding me through them. And then I'm able to sort of on my own time solve those problems. Is that kind of how that works?
I think there's probably some of that. The other issue with math is in some ways it goes back to the way I was taught math, but not entirely, but an element of it, which is if you can do math in your head, I think that's a real test of how well you know it. So
Gotcha.
I actually think the audio, like we have a great video on our site, which is, it's an example of a little girl who I think is 4. And in this case, she's using it on Fire TV Cube. So there's a big screen in front of her. But the problem is, you know, what's 3 + 2? And at 4 years old, you know, Irina, correct me if I'm wrong, but like most kids haven't been taught arithmetic yet. So she does exactly what you would expect. She sees 3 objects on one part of the screen as the narration says, you know, there's 3 lemons. I don't think it's lemons, but, you know, you have 3 lemons. And you see her go, and she even says the words like 3. And then we give you 2 more lemons, and she goes 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And she counts.
Yeah.
And that's exactly how addition works.
Right.
And so, you know, she's clearly not writing it down, but she's doing the mental exercise at a very young age that you expect younger kids to do. I think, you know, as we get into multiplication and division and things like that, some of the visuals also reinforce what kids are learning. But, you know, a classic thing that we all learn in school is the times tables. And, you know, you're not like, as an adult, if you can do times tables in your head, it's so much of a shortcut to sort of solving everyday problems than if you have to write everything down and like redo, you know. So I think we're taking advantage of that notion that, particularly for math, that if you practice and practice and practice and hear it different ways, sometimes as a word problem, sometimes as a number problem, you'll master it in a way that's a little bit different than if you were only working on a workbook. I think for the other skills, you know, Irina certainly has the background to talk about that for things like reading comprehension, et cetera. But So I think it's less likely to be that you're following along, writing it down, than you're processing in your head for math. For other ones, maybe.
And for lower levels, I think for harder
Mm-hmm.
problems, yes, that's whatever you have to write down when you get to division and more complex problems, that's probably the best. But we try to leverage voice and rely on voice as much as we can, without requiring kids to go and get a pen and pencil, basically.
Right. That's interesting. So to recap, you have Bamboo Math, you have Bamboo Reading Comprehension, you have Bamboo Music, correct? And then obviously we're going to talk about the newest one, Bamboo English. What, did I miss one?
A couple more. So actually the reading comprehension one is called Bamboo Books.
Okay.
So Bamboo Math, Bamboo Books, Bamboo Music, you mentioned, Bamboo Luminaries, which is really social studies or kind of history type application. And that's where we give you information and quizzes about historically important people. And some of them are extremely well known. And I think we would argue all of them should be known.
Yeah.
And many I didn't know, and I'm still learning. But so that's another fun one.
And that's on Alexa and Google. That's
right.
One.
That's on Google as well as Alexa. And then Highlights Storybooks from Bamboo, which is the collaboration with Highlights Magazine, or Highlights for Children is the publisher. And that's another listening and reading comprehension one. And then of course Bamboo English, which we're extremely excited about. You want to start talking about that?
Yeah, let's go.
All right,
let's share the news.
Let's do it. So we, really listen to a lot of our customers, both kids and parents, particularly as the pandemic started to create challenges for families, and we got a lot of feedback from customers, in this case parents, saying, "You guys really saved me, because my kids." We're trying to do school from home. This is like March, April. We're trying to do school from home. I have to work from home. I'm on a conference call. My kids are interrupting me. And now I can just say, you know what, go try Bamboo Math for 20 minutes or half an hour, or go listen to a story and, use Bamboo Books. And so we listened to that and we thought about it, and we thought, okay, well, what do kids learn in school that is really important, and that both is important for their future and parents are concerned about? And we have math, so that one's covered, although we have some fun plans for the future for that one too. But the one that we really had only covered a small slice of in the reading comprehension is the field more broadly known as English language arts. And English language arts encompasses many different skills, spelling, phonics, grammar, vocabulary, as well as listening comprehension. And so we thought, well, what if we could teach all of those and put it all in one Alexa skill? And so we came up with Bamboo English, and it actually has 60,000 different exercises, which, if you think about it, that is a tremendous amount of content.
Yeah.
And so our goal, and I really do want to turn this over to Irina, our goal was to offer something for kids kindergarten through 5th grade. And again, they can be self-paced, but they could start, if they're 4 or 5 or 6 years old, they could start in kindergarten. They could start in sort of the equivalent of what they would learn in September in kindergarten, and covering all those different areas, those 5 different areas, vocabulary, grammar, etc., and progress through the entire year, learning as fast as they can or at whatever pace they can. And if they stayed with us through 5th grade, they could actually learn all of their English language arts curriculum using Bamboo English. And it can also be used to reinforce what they're learning in school. But right now, especially when the tools are not available or are very complicated or require logins, or parents who are supposed to be working to sit with their kids. Right now, it's especially useful and important for families. So I do, Irina, you should really jump in and explain how the exercises work in Bamboo English. But that's the high level, is 60,000 exercises. I will say that it's our first subscription offer. So you actually get 10,000 of the 60,000 for free, which is still a tremendous amount of content. But it's really unit 1 out of 6 for all those different areas, all the grades, all that stuff. So you can be in 4th grade and start at unit 1 for free, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
And you get a ton of content for free. And the subscription price is pretty low. It's $5.99 a month. And it's a huge amount of curriculum. So Irina, jump in.
Well, another new thing that you forgot to mention is that it can be set for several children within the same family, so up to 6. So then each child can work independently, and we track their progress independently. So if there's a 1st grader and a 4th grader, they can work on 2 different set of materials, basically. So Ian mentioned, we broke it down. We basically took a standard English language arts curriculum and extracted everything that is super adaptable to voice, and bucketed it into 4 areas: phonics, spelling, vocabulary, and grammar. And then the listening comprehension component we already had. We just put our stories in that component. And the exercises are, again, it's super fun and super engaging for kids. So phonics is based around rhyming words, because that's the way kids start learning about what sounds letters make. And it's basically a game. We ask questions in different ways, whether one word rhymes with another word, and then we would read a sentence like glue was stuck to her shoe, and we ask kids to identify which words rhyme. Spelling, we go with high frequency words to irregularly spelled words. Can't speak anymore. And we already heard feedback from parents that they love the spelling one, because again, we ask different questions. We ask, is the first letter in the word kitten K or L? And then they can identify first letter, last letter, whether the word is spelled correctly. Kids love spotting mistakes. So we would spell something incorrectly and we would ask, is that spelled like this? And they would say no. Grammar, we cover parts of speech, so noun, verb, adjective, and then it goes up. You start with a noun, and in 4th grade, you would be looking at comparative degrees of adverbs and adjectives, and punctuation. So everything that kids typically learn in their grammar units is covered in there. And vocabulary, voice basically allows you to acquire and build your vocabulary, because it's so easy. We would ask synonyms, antonyms, or the definitions. And again, we're stuck with our approach that you can ask with one word, you could ask with, answer longer phrases. And I think it's a super engaging and new. It's definitely innovative. I don't think anybody else is offering anything like this yet. But as you mentioned, Dave, that's where it's going, right? It's the comprehensive. It's a platform that is able to accommodate that type of interaction, and we're planning to deepen and expand and bring it to other areas, academic areas as well.
Well, what's fascinating?
Can I jump in on one thing, because I think it's Irina's example is excellent. On the grammar one with parts of speech, we read a sentence and we say, what's the verb or what's the adjective? And I actually think voice or the audio experience of listening to a sentence, I think if we all think back on our years, that we're kind of that K through 5 years, I do think a lot of times it's actually easier when you hear the sentence, the boy rode to the store. What's the verb? Sometimes it's actually like it in your head, and it might actually be exercising different parts of your brain to hear it and identify that road is the verb versus seeing it written down in a workbook and identifying it. So I think it's a very unique, Irina's point that we're the only
She's
ones
nodding
doing
her head
that.
too. I think
That's right.
because I was going to ask is like,
Yeah.
This type of learning, really auditory oriented. Can you speak to that? I don't know much about the way in which our brains learn, at a young age like that, but you're nodding your head as if there's a lot to this.
Yes, typically the best is auditory and visual combined because one reinforces the other. But the auditory is definitely less present everywhere. At school, it's basically impossible to do one-on-one interaction. It's a lecture, it's more passive. So I think one huge benefit of voice is it's active, right? What Ian described, looking at a worksheet and trying to find a verb, that's a relatively passive thing that involves part of your brain. You're not listening and processing. You're not, basically your parts of your brains are not interacting. Here, you need to listen, process, and then formulate your response and speak it, right? So it's a lot more complicated process, and it basically fires out more neurons than if you're just looking at a piece of paper. And another thing we didn't mention is immediate feedback. Also, the worksheet is not going to give you immediate feedback. Voice would. What we would say, not quite. And if you don't get it twice, you get a mini lesson. We would explain what a verb is, and then we ask you to try again. Again, there's no worksheet that can do this. So the immediate feedback and the process, the engaging of different parts of the brain is definitely unique to voice technology. And the younger you start, the more, basically the better outcomes. We can't wait to study, like to measure the outcomes, which we will hopefully do soon. But again, it's new and nobody has done a study yet.
Well, speaking of outcomes, I know, Ian, going back to the last conversation that we had on the podcast, one of the things that really stuck out in my mind was the analytics piece, and going off of what I said earlier about like parents' reception, teachers' perception or reception. It seems like along with having live, it's an active way to learn and you get that instant feedback. I think that it's also probably really important from a learning standpoint to have the the parents' oversight into like, where are my child's, where are they excelling and where are the spots that maybe they need a little bit more support. And so have you found that that to be an area that is being well received within the parents of the students that are using Bamboo?
Yeah, I'd say in general, the feature we have for all of our products, actually, I think except for music, is the parents can sign up for something we call the Bamboo Grove. And the Grove is the parents' dashboard. And so what that means is, we've made it no longer a requirement for the parent to sit with the child while they're doing the work, which is a huge relief to the parents, but they have the option to sign up, and it's completely free. Sign up for Bamboo Grove. You basically get an account from us, and then you can go in later, maybe the kids are asleep at that point, you have a quiet moment, and you can see how, especially with Bamboo English, how each of your different children are doing by looking at the Bamboo Grove on a PC or, on a laptop or desktop. And you can see maybe your fourth graders doing really well on spelling, getting to unit 3 or 4, but struggling in vocabulary. Whereas your first grader, has used Bamboo English every single day. They're doing great with grammar, great with phonics, but spelling's tricky. And so you can take that information, and then as a parent, you're empowered to decide what to do. Do you talk to the teacher and say, hey, can you help our daughter work on spelling? Or do you decide, I'm gonna just practice spelling with my child, or just have them keep spending more time working on Bamboo and keep working on it. And you can see the potential improvement. So I think Bamboo Grove, it has been well received. The fun thing about it is there's just more and more we can keep adding to it. One of the things we've talked about is, should you empower a parent to actually send the report to a teacher using email? Just click on this and say, send to, fourth grade teacher, boom, done. It's not a feature yet, but it's the type of thing that we certainly could do. So, just giving parents, Irina gave me this feedback early on in the company. Too many applications that are available don't give kind of that relatively instant feedback to parents. A parent can't see, oh, my son did great on all of his math, but when it got to word problems, even though they were the same level, they couldn't do the word problems. Like, parents don't get to see that level of granularity. And with Bamboo Grove, you definitely can. So that's what we think has been really helpful to parents, and there's plenty more for us to do there.
Yeah, I guess, what's really cool about you two and Bamboo in general is that, you, Ian, have, I think, really identified, like, here are different ways that we can utilize this technology. And then Irina is saying that, this would actually be a really beneficial way, the instant feedback, the emphasis on auditory learning. And the other thing that I think is so cool is that, just even in the span of the last 4 months or so since we last talked, Ian, you guys have rolled out like this huge new update. And that gives me a lot of hope, because it just seems like you're really just scratching the surface of what's possible here. I mean, you hinted at more ways that you could bring teachers on board, with this idea. And I'm just curious, I mean, whether it be, we haven't even gotten into, Alexa presentation language and APL, and like with the advent of, I saw, with just the new Alexa event today, you had, those little spherical Echo Dots for kids. So probably going to be more adoption there. And then also more sophisticated smart displays. So it seems like the technology is just going to keep advancing to allow for interesting new ways that you can kind of take Bamboo in different directions. What are the things that get you guys really excited about, without giving away any secrets of what's to come or anything like that? I'm just curious, like, where do you kind of see more potential here with regard to what you've already built, and then like how you can kind of, like, going off of what you said about teachers and connecting them to, with the parents and the data that's being found there. To me, this just all seems like if you enable children to independently learn at their own pace, that can yield just some really awesome benefits. And the question that I keep coming back to in my mind is, like, what more can you do here from this perspective?
Yeah, I guess the thing we've really done with Bamboo English, in some ways better than any other product we've released so far, is tie the curriculum quite explicitly to what kids are learning in school, in kindergarten through 5th grade. And so we've done that in English. We haven't been as explicit in Bamboo Math, but we know that that's something we need to work on. So we think that is probably an area of opportunity for us. And then I would say in some of the other areas that we've either developed or have thought about, ultimately, why shouldn't a child be able to learn anything that they would learn either in school or after school with Bamboo's products? Like, that should be our goal.
What do you think, Irina? Like, what are the things that that obviously this is something you're really passionate about, but what elements of this do you think, like, can really be expanded upon?
I definitely agree with Ian, the comprehensive menu of options. For me too, when I started looking at Bamboo English and kind of I presented it to our head of engineering, he looked at me and said, "Oh, that's a lot." And we built it, right? So it's, you start somewhere. So I think covering core areas that kids learn, and then offering all the after school, the music theory that we already have, and building on that and adding maybe other fun activities. And what you mentioned, connecting, I think having this technology at home, but allowing kids to reinforce and take their learning further, connecting classroom with home is very important, because there's definitely the need for that link has been identified long ago. It needs to be either put in place, reinforced, or strengthened wherever it exists, because then you have communication between school and homes. And now parents are basically looking at education in new ways, right? They have to figure out how to handle it, because it might be that the way we're used to it is never coming back the same way. At least some changes I think are going to be great. And having this voice technology with clear learning capabilities at home will help that link. And we just need to make sure the teachers are familiar with the technology and understand what it can do. And then kind of my hope that is at some point it will get integrated into the homework, so to speak. You learn this at school, go practice at home, and then parents can basically send the Grove results back to the teacher. And it's very easy for the teacher to interpret what those mean. So I think the link between classroom and home is very important, and my hope that the Bamboo will help strengthening it.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. I love that idea of the link. And like you said, I mean, I just keep going back to like my own childhood, and homework was, I feel like the biggest drawback with traditional homework was always that it created way too much of the potential for kids to fall behind. For whatever reason, you might have just not been the type of kid that was focused and had the attention span, and before you knew it, all of the time in the class felt wasted because you weren't comprehending anything, because you'd lost track of everything. And so this whole idea of, I think, being able to learn on your own time, having that immediate feedback, and then also being able, like Ian mentioned, parents don't necessarily need to sit with their kids, but they can still kind of have the same byproduct of seeing the results and seeing, okay, where are the deficiencies that we need to reinforce. And so it seems like a huge opportunity for you all is, I think, with schools to recognize that these types of tools, and especially as accessible as they are, you can almost imagine schools outfitting the kids with the Echo Dots as part of the tuition, or even if it's a public school, grants or something like that. But there just seems to be a lot of really positive factors in aggregate. And obviously, I always say this when talking about this technology, it's such a young technology, and to already see so much utility being derived from it, I think it speaks volumes to where this technology will be in even 2 to 3 years from now, and what you'll be able to do with it.
Yeah, I think that absolutely makes a lot of sense. It is interesting on the teacher front. We've just started working with a group that I've known for many years called the Technology Access Foundation, and they're kind of an interesting nonprofit. And what they do is they actually run public schools in a kind of joint operating agreement with the school district. So they're not a charter. Some people are like, oh, they're a charter. No, they're actually not a charter. They're a nonprofit, and they essentially reach agreement with individual school districts. But they're actually going to be piloting this program that we also announced recently called Everyone Learns. And that goes right to Irina's and my passion, which is kids who can't afford this should be able to get it. And so we're working on getting really devices through grants for free to families in need, and also our subscription through grants and us reducing the price for families in need. The grant will entirely pay for it. But anyway, the Technology Access Foundation, we did some early demos of how Bamboo English worked with them. And they said exactly what Irina said, which is, it will be great for our teachers. One of the other things they do is they train every teacher who works in their schools. But if their teachers could ask the kids to go to particular units in Bamboo English or any of our other products, so that, on a Tuesday in October, the teacher knows they're covering adjectives. Mm-hmm. And so they can ask the kids, okay, go open Bamboo English and ask for this unit, and you can work on adjectives, and then, come back. Now we're not there yet to be able to allow them to ask for that specific exercise, but actually when we were testing, we enabled that for ourselves. So we just have to think through just what's the voice interaction that would make it easy for a child to say, oh, because there's, with 60,000 different exercises, even though they're categorized, like making that really easy for a kid is one of the things we just need to think through. But, we think we have a reasonably good way to probably do that. So then even better, the teacher can say, yeah, kind of like turn to textbook, at home, read textbook chapter 3, pages 10 to 15, and chapter 4, pages 28 to 38. Well, in this case, it'd be like, go home, try Bamboo English, units this, this, and this, do Bamboo Math, units this and this, And
it's a voice guiding you so they can't get lost.
That's right. So that's another area that we think is very promising. So I do think that as we get more and more kind of feedback from teachers in schools, that feedback loop between teacher potentially assigning work, student doing the work, and parents actually seeing the results in that feed, and which can go back to the teacher if there's an area for development. That feedback loop actually is something schools are very passionate about. And really, Irina can certainly vouch for this, but my experience as a parent is, if you're lucky, it happens once a year during a parent-teacher conference, maybe twice a year. Yeah. But then, it could be like 4 months after the child was really I guess in the cases where kids are really struggling, most teachers will be like, hey, look, Johnny or Isaiah, or it's usually a boy who's having the problem. No. So they need to spend some more time on their spelling or what, if it's a big issue, usually that's covered. But a lot of times, it's that big middle of the class that they're not struggling, they're not blitzing ahead, but are they doing everything they could be? Well, if there was a tight feedback loop, even like nightly, probably realistically parents might look at it weekly, but that's that's something we can enable.
Yeah, but I think that's also one of the positive outcomes that's going to come out of this pandemic, because the teachers are now in touch with parents for the first time by necessity. Mm-hmm. But if that continues, that thing will change with the no feedback and the no loop. So there's hope that this actually will bring a positive change in that.
That's a really interesting point. And the way that I keep thinking about it is that if I can understand where those deficiencies lie, it goes to that whole thought of like one-on-one teaching. Like, I feel like the teachers then are so much more well-informed about what that one-on-one should be like. And I feel like that's what's really interesting about this tool, is that it allows for you to sort of capture that and create those profiles, if you will, of where the learning, where the learning behaviors are. Awesome. Cool. Well, cool. Well, you guys, this has been awesome. I love hearing about Bamboo. As much as I think people focus on the consumer applications, and I guess this is in some regard a consumer application, I love the verticals. I love healthcare, education, agriculture, all these interesting subsets of use cases. I just find so interesting. So, always welcome to come on and share what's going on at Bamboo. And, I'm really interested to watch you all continue to keep growing. Because like I said at the beginning of the conversation, what's so interesting about you all is that not only are you doing so many really cool things from the EdTech standpoint, but I think you're also a really good representation of sort of like the most sophisticated types of skills that are being built that are really like lending itself to the overall legitimacy of what can really be built on these new platforms.
Well, thank you, Dave. It's always fun to spend some time with you. Appreciate you having us on the podcast.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Well, thanks for everybody who tuned in here this week, and we will chat with you next time. Cheers. Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Future Ear Radio. For more content like this, just head over to futureear.co, where you can read all the articles that I've been writing these past few years on the worlds of voice technology and hearables and how the two are beginning to intersect. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll chat with you next time.